December 2nd, 2025, Sam Altman sends an internal memo to every OpenAI employee. Subject line, Code Red. Drop everything. Stop working on new features. Kill the advertising plans. Cancel the shopping agents. There's only one priority now. Fix ChatGPT. Because Google just ate their lunch. Gemini 3 beat ChatGPT on the hardest AI test ever created, a test literally called humanity's last exam. And it's not just the benchmarks. Gemini went from 450 million users to 585 million in 3 months. That's a 30% jump. Meanwhile, ChatGPT's growth flatlined. This is the story of how the AI war just flipped and why OpenAI is scared. November 30th, 2022. OpenAI releases ChatGPT to the public. 5 days, 1 million users. 2 months, 100 million. The fastest growing app in human history. Inside Google headquarters, Sundar Pichai calls an emergency meeting. Code Red. Because some startup just threatens search. The thing that generates 8.5 billion queries every day. 8.5 billion opportunities to show ads. Google panics. They rush Bard to market. The demo bombs. The stock drops 9%. $100 billion. Gone. OpenAI looks unstoppable. But that was 3 years ago. December 2nd, 2025. Now it's Sam Altman writing the emergency memo. The roles completely reversed. Between August and November, Gemini's monthly users grew 30%. ChatGPT, 6%. Download growth is even more dramatic. Gemini up 190% year over year. ChatGPT, 85%. ChatGPT still has more daily users, 190 million versus 35 million. But here's what Sam Altman sees. Google has 3 billion devices. ChatGPT needed viral growth. Gemini just needs to not screw up what's already installed. The lines are crossing. November 20th, 2025. Google launches Gemini 3. Researchers test it with humanity's last exam, impossibly difficult PhD level reasoning. Gemini 3 dominates. ChatGPT can't keep up. Then Mark Benioff, CEO of Salesforce, publicly switches from ChatGPT to Gemini. That's not a review. That's a defection. Sam Altman tweets congratulations. But behind closed doors, Code Red. Everything stops except fixing ChatGPT. This is survival mode. But here's what Sam Altman realized. This isn't a fair fight. It never was. Now let's analyze Google a bit. Google's capital expenditure, $75 billion this year. Most goes to chips, not Nvidia chips, their own, TPUs. Between 2024 and 2030, manufacturing their own chips saves Google $135 billion to $180 billion. Why such massive savings? Because Nvidia's profit margin is 70%. Google skips that entirely. A single TPU pod connects over 9,000 chips working together. Equivalent Nvidia system, 72 chips max. OpenAI rents everything from Microsoft. Microsoft buys from Nvidia, full price, plus margins. The meter's always running. But chips need data. Training AI requires massive amounts. OpenAI pays between $350 million and $900 million annually for data licensing. Google owns YouTube, over 1 billion hours of video content. Google Search processes 8.5 billion queries daily. Gmail, Google Maps, Chrome, Android. 3 billion devices generating data every second. OpenAI spends $900 million a year for data that's worse than what Google gets free. Then there's distribution. Google has 3 billion Android devices. Gemini comes pre-installed in your search bar, your photos, your keyboard. In the US, users interact with Gemini through the OS twice as often as the downloadable app. People use it more when they don't have to think about using Gemini. Google pays to keep it that way. Apple gets 20 billion a year to make Google the default search. Samsung gets 8 billion, 26.3 billion total in annual distribution payments. OpenAI has to convince every user individually. Google just has to not screw up what's already there. And then there's money. OpenAI burns 9 billion a year. That's 25 million every single day. They need another 207 billion to survive through 2030. 207 billion. That's nearly the entire annual GDP of Greece. And it's almost 4 times the total capital they've raised in their entire history. Google generated 74 billion in free cash flow last year. Profit, real money. They're investing over 90 billion in infrastructure this year alone, more than OpenAI has raised in its entire history, in one single year, while being highly profitable. This isn't competition. It's a mismatch. While everyone watches chatbots, Google's building something else. Waymo has driven 127 million miles on real streets. They added 31 million miles in just the last 3 months. They're operating 450,000 paid rides weekly. Safety record? 92% fewer injury claims than human drivers. Every mile is training data. Every turn, every decision, every edge case. OpenAI, zero self-driving cars. Google, they have robots. 77,000 robotics tests. Real hardware, real physics, real world learning. And they're connecting it all through Project Astra, an agent platform that doesn't just process text. It sees, it hears, it speaks, and it acts in the physical world. But here's where it gets serious. Google's building nuclear reactors. 500 megawatts coming online by 2035. They've signed a $1.6 billion contract with NextEra Energy to restart the Duane Arnold nuclear plant, specifically for their data centers. Google plans decades ahead. OpenAI plans quarters ahead. Demis Hassabis runs Google's AI, Nobel Prize winner, Chemistry 2024, for AlphaFold. Isomorphic Labs has deals with Eli Lilly and Novartis worth $3 billion, using AI to design drugs. Then there's Verily, Google's precision health company. They're not just designing molecules, they're running the clinical trials and delivering personalized medicine to patients. Google controls the entire cycle from molecule design to patient treatment. Meanwhile, in their quantum lab, Willow, their quantum chip, computing 13,000 times faster than any supercomputer. While OpenAI is trying to make ChatGPT remember your conversation, Google's breaking physics. But here's where it gets practical. In the enterprise market, Google's dominating on price. Google Workspace, $14 per user per month. Gemini AI included. Free. Microsoft 365, $12.50 per user. Copilot, $30 extra per user per month. For a 100-person company, Google charges $16,800 annually. Microsoft charges $51,000. Google's 3 times cheaper. When your competitor gives away free what you charge premium for, that's structural dominance. December 2nd, Code Red. Now you know what's happening. OpenAI burns 9 billion yearly and needs 207 billion to survive. Google invests over 90 billion this year while generating 74 billion in profit. OpenAI pays 900 million for data. Google gets it free. OpenAI rents chips at full price. Google saves 135 to 180 billion making their own. OpenAI needs downloads. Google has 3 billion pre-installed devices. OpenAI has no self-driving cars, no robots, no nuclear reactors, no Nobel Prizes, no quantum computers. And here's the long game. Gemma, Google's open source AI, If AI software becomes free, OpenAI is dead. But Google owns the hardware, the chips. They win either way. But let's be honest about something. Google isn't invincible. They won the search monopoly case. They avoided the breakup. But there's a bigger threat lurking, the ad tech case. The government argues Google controls both sides of the advertising market, buyers and sellers, taking a 30% cut of every dollar spent on the web. And in that case, a forced breakup is very likely. If they lose, they could have to sell off a massive part of their business. That's an existential risk. The code red isn't about fixing a product. It's about Sam Altman realizing they were never actually ahead. ChatGPT's launch wasn't the beginning of dominance. It was the moment that woke a sleeping giant. 3 years ago, Google declared code red over ChatGPT. They panicked, rushed Bard. It failed. Everyone thought OpenAI won, but Google was building. While everyone watched ChatGPT's numbers, Google was designing chips, signing distribution deals, accumulating driving data, building reactors, winning Nobel Prizes, building quantum computers, signing pharmaceutical contracts. Now it's OpenAI declaring code red. The circle closed. OpenAI has the brand. ChatGPT is synonymous with AI, but Google has everything else. And in a 10-year war, brand doesn't beat 180 billion in cost advantages. 3 years. That's what it took. When Google faced their crisis, they had their own chips, infinite data, 3 billion devices, and 74 billion in annual cash flow. They had the weapons. They just needed time. When OpenAI faces their crisis, a chat app and a $9 billion annual tab. Google's code red was caution. OpenAI's is panic. And that's the difference. That's the story. If this kind of investigation interests you, subscribe to Krento. Thanks for watching.